My fiancé told me you're lucky I even chose you, so I took back the ring, the car, the apartment, and let her sit in her luck alone. I'm a 28-year-old guy. When I met Rachel, I thought I'd met the love of my life. From the moment we started dating, everything felt electric late-night talks, spontaneous road trips, that weird little way she laughed at my terrible jokes, like they were the funniest things she'd ever heard. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what it feels like to be understood. She noticed the little things about me, how I organized my workspace, how I stayed late to finish projects, how I kept promises even when it wasn't convenient. And she made me feel like it mattered, like my effort was seen and appreciated. Honestly, I had never felt that before in a relationship. Of course, it wasn't all perfect. Looking back now, there were little quirks that, at the time, I barely registered. She'd sometimes make these offhand comments about my friends, joking that they weren't really my crowd, or tease me about my family in ways that made me laugh nervously. I shrugged them off, telling myself she was just playful. And yet, even in those early days, there was this faint, edgy, a subtle reminder that she could be, controlling if she wanted. But love blinds you, right? I focused on the charm, the connection, the future I could see with her. Then came the proposal. I remember kneeling in our favorite little park, heart hammering in my chest as I asked her to marry me. She said, yes. The world felt like it paused, like every decision I'd ever made led me right to that moment. Picking out the engagement ring was surreal. I felt like I was finally building the life I had always dreamed of. Moving into our first apartment together, I remember the smell of fresh paint, the boxes stacked in corners, and the excitement buzzing in every tiny room. It was supposed to be perfect, and it was, mostly. But even then, she would drop little lines now and then, almost in passing, that made me pause. Things like, well, I guess this is fine for us, or, you really think this is good enough? I ignored them at first. Small cracks in the paint, I thought. Little did I know those cracks were just the beginning. It started with little things that felt off. I noticed Rachel's patience wearing thinner over minor stuff, like the way she'd sigh when I forgot to take out the trash, or how she'd roll her eyes when I spent a few hours catching up with friends. I remember one evening, sitting on our tiny balcony with a beer in hand, she snapped, do you even think about how your choices affect me? Her tone wasn't playful, it was sharp, like she was slicing at something inside me I hadn't even realized was exposed. I tried to laugh it off, saying, I thought hanging out with Mark for a couple of hours wasn't a big deal. She just crossed her arms and stared, waiting for me to apologize. I felt guilty, like my intentions didn't matter at all. Even in front of friends, I started noticing her little digs. One night at dinner, she leaned over and whispered, you really shouldn't have ordered that. It's kind of cheap. My face burned, but I laughed nervously, hoping no one noticed. Inside, though, a tiny voice was growing, asking why someone I loved so much would constantly make me feel small. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just stress, or maybe I was reading too much into it. But the pattern kept repeating. Subtle criticisms, little digs disguised as jokes, and constant reminders that nothing I did seemed quite enough for her. And then came the first real argument. I can still feel it standing in the kitchen, boxes of groceries on the counter, rain tapping against the window. She was upset that I didn't notice she'd rearranged the living room the way she wanted it. Why can't you just see what I need? She demanded, voice sharp, eyes narrowing. I tried to explain that I hadn't realized that I was tired after work, but she cut me off. You're always so clueless about me, she said, and something inside me shifted. The warmth I'd felt in the early days was cracking, and I didn't know how to fix it. I sat there for a moment, staring at her, wondering if this was just a rough patch, or if I was already in way over my head. And in that silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the first of many battles I hadn't even seen coming. The first time I really felt blindsided, I knew something wasn't right. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I'd invited a few friends over to watch a game. Rachel had agreed, but the moment they arrived, I started noticing the looks she was giving me, tiny, sharp, impossible to ignore. At first I brushed it off. Maybe she was just shy, I told myself. But then came the comments. As we cheered for a goal she muttered under her breath, loud enough for one of my friends to hear. You really think this is how a man should act? My chest tightened, and I laughed nervously, pretending not to hear it. Inside, though, something was cracking. Later, when we were alone, I confronted her. What was that about earlier? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She leaned back on the couch, crossing her legs, eyes sharp. I don't know what. You mean? She said, feigning innocence, but the smirk told me otherwise. I just wish you'd be more aware sometimes. You make things awkward without even realizing it. My stomach sank. Awkward? I was just having fun with my friends. Was I already doing something wrong without knowing it? And then it happened the moment that hit me like a punch I didn't see coming? Later that night, during a quiet moment in the kitchen, she said it casually, almost laughing. Honestly, you're lucky I even chose you. Those words landed heavier than any argument, heavier than any criticism. I froze. She didn't. Say it in anger, or in the heat of a fight, it was deliberate, cold, and final. Lucky. Lucky I exist. Lucky I'm here. Lucky I'm enough. The implications gnawed at me. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my life. The warmth I'd associated with her smile, her charm, our early days, everything felt like a lie. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a rough patch or a quirky personality trait. There was a deeper, darker pattern emerging. I was smack in the middle of it. I had a sinking feeling I couldn't shake. This was just the beginning. And whatever was coming next, I wasn't sure I was ready for it. Things started to spiral faster than I could process. Rachel didn't yell or throw things. She didn't need to. Her control was quieter, sharper, more suffocating, she began, managing every little part of my life under the guise of helping. I remember one evening when I wanted to call my brother to catch up. As soon as I picked up the phone, she leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and said, "Are you really going to waste time talking to him again? You should be doing something useful, like helping me with dinner or sorting the bills." I froze, phone in hand, caught between wanting to snap and wanting to avoid another fight. I put the phone down, feeling a mix of anger, embarrassment, and shame. It didn't stop there. I tried to make plans with friends. Me. I guess I'm not that important to you if you'd rather go out again, she'd say softly, voice almost trembling. Like she was hurt, but the hurt was carefully measured, designed to make me doubt myself. She started pointing out every mistake I made, no matter how small, leaving the dishes in the sink, forgetting to water the plants, even how I folded my laundry. And every correction, every sigh, every disappointed glance chipped away at my confidence. I started second-guessing myself constantly. Am I really that careless? Am I failing somehow? Even my friends noticed I was quieter, withdrawn, hesitant to share anything. One night, while cooking dinner together, she looked at me and said, "I just don't know why you can't get it right the first time. I mean, some people are just better at life than others, you know?" The words were casual, but inside it felt like a hammer hitting over and over. By the end of that week, I was exhausted, not physically, but mentally. Every decision, every thought seemed to pass through her filter first. And while I tried to hold on to the memories of how things started, the warmth, the laughter, I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. This wasn't love. It was control. And deep down, I knew if I didn't figure out a way to protect myself soon, I would lose myself completely. It hit me one night like a punch to the chest. I had spent the entire day at work, exhausted and running on autopilot, and came home looking forward to just collapsing on the couch. Rachel was waiting, of course, sitting at the kitchen table with that familiar tight smile. She didn't ask how my day went. Instead, she launched into criticism the moment I stepped inside. "Do you even care about this apartment?" she said, gesturing to a corner where a stack of mail had accumulated. "It's like you don't even notice anything anymore. Honestly, sometimes I wonder why I put up with this." I tried to explain that I had been busy, that I hadn't meant to ignore anything, but she wasn't hearing me. Her voice was calm, almost clinical, each word a blade. "You're always making excuses. I shouldn't have to remind you of everything. Some people just care more about themselves than others. I felt my chest tighten, my throat closing up. I wanted to scream to leave, to tell her she had no right, but instead, I just sat there nodding, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt. Later that night, I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. Her words echoed in my head. You're always making excuses. You're lucky I even chose you. That last part kept replaying like a broken record, and I realized that the person I had loved, the woman I had trusted completely, had been slowly eroding my sense of worth. I had started the week feeling optimistic about our future, about building a life together. By the time I turned off the lights, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, heart racing, hands shaking. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt truly happy in her presence. The warmth, the excitement, the laughter we had shared, it all seemed gone, replaced with judgment, manipulation, and constant guilt. For the first time, I considered the unthinkable. What if I was trapped? What if this was my life now? And as I lay there, staring into the darkness, I realized something terrifying. I couldn't go on like this. Something had to change. But I had no idea how or if I even could. I never thought I'd catch her in a lie. Not Rachel. Not someone I had loved so completely. But one evening, while she was in the shower, I picked up her phone by accident, just to check a notification I thought was mine, and froze. There it was. Messages. Dozens of them. Flirty and intimate. With someone I didn't know. My heart stopped. My stomach turned over. I scrolled faster, each text hitting harder than the last. Plans she had made with work friends. Dinners she had to attend. Late nights she spent on errands. All lies. She had been living this double life while I poured everything into our relationship. I could feel my hands trembling. The betrayal wasn't just the secrecy, it was the audacity. The way she had manipulated me into believing I was the one in control, the one holding everything together, while she was free to do whatever she wanted. I remember sitting there on the couch, phone clutched to my chest, staring at the ceiling like it could answer the questions I didn't dare ask. My mind raced. Was she cheating? Was this why I felt so small all the time? Was every criticism, every put down, a way to keep me compliant? When she came out of the shower, I tried to act normal, but my chest was pounding, my face hot. "Who's this?" I asked, voice barely more than a whisper. She froze for a split second, just long enough for the anger I'd been holding back to flare, but then she smiled. That same casual, effortless smile I had fallen for. "It's nothing," she said. "Just someone from work." But her eyes told a different story. I could see it. I could see the lie, the thrill, the absolute disregard for me, for us. I felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. Everything I thought I knew about her, about us, about myself, was gone. And in that moment, a fire lit inside me, half fury, half heartbreak. I realized that if I didn't act, I would be swallowed whole by her control. The person I had loved, the life I had envisioned, it wasn't real. Not even close. And as I sat there, frozen in disbelief, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again after that night. I couldn't stay frozen anymore. Something inside me snapped, not in anger. Not yet, but in a quiet, determined way. I realized I had been giving her power over me for far too long. Every decision I'd made, every thought I'd doubted, every ounce of self-worth I'd sacrificed, it ended here. I started taking notes, mentally cataloging every instance of manipulation. Every lie, every subtle dig she had thrown my way over the months. I was building a map of her control, and for the first time, I could see the patterns clearly. I began quietly reclaiming small pieces of my life. I organized my finances, checking bills and accounts she had insisted I didn't need to worry about. I reconnected with friends I had begun avoiding because she made me feel guilty for spending time with them. Each phone call, each conversation was a tiny act of rebellion, but it felt monumental. I was starting to feel like myself again. I could feel a shift. The fear that had been embedded in me for months was loosening its grip. Rachel. She continued her controlling ways, making offhand comments about how I needed to be more attentive or more considerate. all while I smiled politely and internally counted the days until I could confront her. I kept my cool, pretending to be the same compliant, quiet boyfriend she had trained me to be. But beneath the surface, a strategy was forming. I was no longer just reacting, I was planning. One night, while she was talking about her day, I caught myself actually listening without judgment. But instead of agreeing with her criticisms, I let them wash over me, collecting them like ammunition. Each careless word, each manipulative comment, each sneaky lie, everything was a piece of the puzzle. And as I looked at her, smiling obliviously, I realized something powerful. I was no longer the victim. I was about to take back control. And yet, even as the fire built inside me, I knew the biggest challenge was still ahead, the moment when I would finally confront her with everything she had taken from me. Just when I thought I had the situation mapped out, life threw me a curveball I never saw coming. I discovered that Rachel had been secretly planning something that could have trapped me completely. I stumbled across an email thread while organizing some paperwork she had been looking into co-signing a lease for an apartment I didn't even know we were jointly committing to. And there were hints of a loan in her name tied to our finances. My heart sank. She hadn't just been deceiving me emotionally, she was trying to box me in legally, financially, and socially. I sat on the floor of our living room. Papers scattered around me, feeling my chest tighten with disbelief and fury. Everything I had been preparing, my quiet reclaiming of power, my careful notes, my planning suddenly became urgent. I realized she was playing the long game, trying to make sure I couldn't walk away without paying the price. And just like that, the stakes skyrocketed. What I thought was a slow burn of manipulation had turned into a full-blown trap. When she came home that evening, I kept my composure, smiling and asking about her day like nothing had happened. She laughed, leaning against the doorframe, unaware that I already knew. But inside, a storm was building. I felt a mixture of shock, fear, and exhilaration. A strange clarity that comes when you finally see the full picture. She had underestimated me, and that mistake was going to be her undoing. That night, I stayed awake until the early hours, pacing our apartment, heart pounding, imagining how I could undo everything she had planned. Every scenario played out in my mind, taking back control, reclaiming my independence, exposing her lies, and amidst the fear, a strange calm settled over me. I was no longer a pawn in her game. I had the upper hand now, and she didn't even know it, as dawn broke. I knew one thing for certain. I had to act soon, carefully, decisively, before she realized I had seen everything. And when I did, there would be no going back. After discovering her plans, I knew I had to play it smart. I couldn't let her sense that I knew everything. She thrived on control, and even the slightest sign of rebellion would make her tighten her grip. So I put on a mask, smiling, joking, pretending to be the same compliant boyfriend she thought she had molded. Every laugh, every casual comment, every nod was calculated, feeding into the illusion that nothing had changed. On the outside, I was calm, even content. But inside, my mind was working nonstop, running scenarios, building a strategy. I reconnected with my friends in small ways, inviting them over for coffee, texting them late at night, quietly reestablishing the support network I had lost. Rachel noticed some of it, of course, and made subtle digs. "You're spending a lot of time on that," she said one afternoon, her tone almost mocking. But I just nodded, letting it slide. She thought she was seeing weakness. She thought I was still under her thumb. And it felt delicious. Every detail of our shared apartment, every document, every possession, my car, the engagement ring, our lease I cataloged in my mind, imagining the day I would reclaim them all. I reminded myself that patience was a weapon. Rushing would ruin everything. I watched her, noting the way she carried herself, the little habits she had that revealed her overconfidence. She smiled too easily now, laughed too easily, thinking I had no idea how much she had tried to manipulate me. Even as I played the part of the oblivious boyfriend, I felt a quiet fire building inside me. I was readying myself for the moment I would finally act, for the confrontation that would change everything. The calm was deceptive, wasn't peace. It was strategy, preparation, and anticipation. Every hour, every glance, every small interaction was a countdown. And as I poured myself a cup of coffee that night, I couldn't help but smirk a little, knowing that the storm was coming in this time. I would be the one holding the lightning rod. The day finally came when I decided I wasn't going to let her manipulate me any longer. I walked into the apartment with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in months, even though my chest was pounding like a drum. Rachel looked up from the couch, smiling as if nothing had changed, and for a moment, I almost doubted myself, almost. Then I remembered everything: the digs, the lies, the nights I spent questioning my own worth. I started with the engagement ring. I held it out to her, voice steady but cold. "This isn't yours anymore," I said. Her smile faltered for the first time, just a flicker, but it was enough. "Wait, what are you?" She started, eyes wide. "You told me I was lucky you chose me," I interrupted, letting the words hang in the air like a judgment. "Well, I guess the luck runs both ways now," she opened her mouth. But I didn't give her a chance to justify anything. Next, I walked her through the apartment, reclaiming the pieces of life I had built with my own hands or car keys. The lease documents, even the little things she had tried to control, like the decor and finances. Every item I took back felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul she had been smothering for months. She tried to argue, to guilt me, her voice rising, shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You can't do this. This isn't fair," she shouted, but I just shook my head, calm, collected, and unshaken. I watched as the shock hit her fully, the realization that I wasn't just walking away emotionally. I was taking back everything. And in that moment, the power balance shifted completely. The woman who had thrived on my compliance, my guilt, my fear, suddenly had nothing. I could see it in her eyes. Panic, confusion, and the first real understanding that I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. I left her sitting there, stunned, with the apartment silent, except for the rain tapping against the windows. And as I walked out the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: free, strong, untouchable, for the first time in months. I was me again. Nothing she did could take that away. The days after I left her apartment were surreal. It felt strange to wake up and not have her voice in the background, critiquing, commenting, controlling. I kept expecting her to call, to guilt-trip me, to demand something back, but she didn't. For the first time in months, I had space to breathe, to think, and to actually process what had happened. I spent hours replaying everything in my mind, from the early days of our whirlwind romance to the subtle digs, manipulations, and the final betrayal. And as I pieced it together, I realized something I hadn't seen clearly before. None of it was my fault. Friends and family were shocked at first. They had known us as a perfect couple, unaware of the tension I had been silently carrying. When I finally opened up, sharing the lies, the control, the constant manipulation, they listened. Some of them were angry on my behalf, some shocked, but all of them offered support I hadn't realized I needed. Slowly, I started rebuilding my life in ways I had almost forgotten were possible: dinners with friends, solo weekends, just the simple joy of deciding my own schedule. It was liberating in a way that felt almost foreign after months of suffocating control. I also had to reflect on myself. I realized how much I had tolerated, how long I had let someone diminish my worth, and why I hadn't acted sooner. That self-reflection was uncomfortable but necessary. I began setting boundaries for the first time in my life, not just with Rachel, but with everyone, learning to recognize manipulation, subtle control, and emotional abuse before it could take root. And yet, even with all the freedom, there was a strange sense of closure in leaving her sitting in the apartment she had tried to use as a cage. I didn't gloat or rub it in, just the quiet knowledge that I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my power. The storm had passed and I was standing in the calm, finally able to look forward instead of constantly worrying about how she might hurt me next. But even as I moved on, a small part of me knew that the experience had changed me forever. It's been weeks since I left Rachel and reclaimed my life, and I can finally breathe without the weight of her manipulation pressing down on me. For the first time in months, I wake up in the morning and feel free, not anxious, not guilty, not second-guessing every move I make. I've started rediscovering parts of myself I had buried, hobbies I had abandoned, friends I had distanced from, even just the simple joy of sitting alone with my thoughts without fear or judgment. Each day, I feel a little lighter, a little stronger. I also realized how much I had underestimated my own resilience. Leaving her wasn't just about taking back possessions, the ring. The car, the apartment tit, was about reclaiming my sense of worth, my dignity, and my autonomy. It was about finally trusting myself to make decisions without someone else's manipulative voice echoing in my head. I walk differently now, hold my head a little higher, and smile more freely because I know that no one has the power to diminish me again. Friends tell me I look different, lighter, calmer, happier. And I do, but it's more than just appearances. It's an internal shift. I've learned to recognize red flags, to set boundaries, and, most importantly, to value myself above anyone else's control. The fear and guilt that once followed me everywhere are gone, replaced with confidence and clarity. And while I don't think about revenge anymore, there's a quiet satisfaction in knowing she's left to face the consequences of her choices alone. The person who once made me feel small, insignificant, and lucky to exist now has no leverage, no power, and no control. I am finally the one holding the keys to my life, not her. For the first time in years, I feel whole, strong, free, and as I step forward into the future, I'm building entirely on my own terms. I know this. I survived her manipulation. I reclaimed my life. And nothing, absolutely nothing, can take that away.